First, before we start, I want to thank Roger Harrington with State Parole. He has helped in scheduling this offender panel now for the last 4 years, and every year we seem to get better and better. Before I take up any more of his time, I'm going to turn it over to Roger. He will make some opening statements, and then we will hear from our panel members. Roger, thank you.
Good morning. Just so I know, because I'm old and I forget things, how many of you have been here before when I've done this? Anybody? Couple. Okay, good. Good. All right, so did you enjoy it last time? Just nod your head. I guess that's yes. Okay. All right, well, as Mr. Martinez said, my name is Roger Harrington. I'm a parole officer. Actually, I'm what they call a team leader, so I'm a first-level supervisor for the Division of Adult Parole. Very happy to be with you today. We're going to talk about a little bit about the Department of Corrections and a little bit about what it means to be an inmate in the Department of Corrections, and then later what it comes to mean when you're on parole. So, can somebody tell me, what does it mean to be on parole in Colorado? What does that mean? How do you get to be on parole? Did you win the lottery, or did you just choose to be, or? Every state is a little different when it comes to post-incarceration supervision. Boy, that's a mouthful, huh? I don't even know what that means, so don't worry about it. So in Colorado, we have obviously state laws that tell you what it is. They determine what is a violation of the law and what is not, right? So you know if you broke the law or not. The law also tells you in the sentencing guidelines how long you can be incarcerated if you commit a crime. In Colorado, to be on parole, it's very simple. It means that you've been convicted of a felony, regardless of the severity. You have been sentenced to and you've served time in a Department of Corrections facility, and now you're out of that facility back in the community with all of us. The length of time that you spend on parole, your length of parole supervision, is determined by the violation that you were convicted of. So in Colorado, we classify felonies by numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The lower the number, the more severe the felony. So a class 1 is worse than a class 2, class 2 is worse than a class 3, and so on. While there are exceptions, the general rule is that if you're convicted of a 4, 5, or 6 felony, class 4, 5, or 6 felony, generally speaking, and there are exceptions, you will serve a mandatory period of 3 years on parole. If you're convicted of a class 1, 2, or 3, there are lots of exceptions, but as a general rule, you're going to spend 5 years on parole. So what does that mean? That means if you're convicted of a felony, you're sentenced to a Department of Corrections facility, you will serve parole time following your release from that facility. Now, there are some exceptions that you can be convicted of a felony and sentenced to community corrections. You don't go to the Department of Corrections, in which case parole would not supervise you because you fall into a different category. But generally speaking, that's how you get to be on parole. You're convicted of a felony in a court of law, you are sentenced to prison time, and then following your release from prison, you will be on parole. So there is a difference that confuses people, and that's what's the difference between probation and parole. Well, probation is a sentence, okay? So if you're convicted of a crime, the judge can sentence you to probation. So it can be a sentence in and of itself. It doesn't mean that you've gone to prison. It just means that the judge says you're going to do probation time. It's usually in lieu of jail. So it could be your first offense, maybe it's not, but it could be your first offense, and the judge is trying to avoid putting you in prison, so he sentences you to probation. And there's different kinds of probation, but you kind of get the idea. It's in lieu of jail, but it is a sentence. It is your punishment for being convicted of that crime. So parole typically is long-term supervision. Probation tends to be short-term supervision. And probation is carried out by probation officers who work for the court. Parole is supervised by parole officers who are employed by the Department of Corrections. The major difference there is that probation officers in Colorado are not peace officers. Parole officers are. Probation officers cannot arrest you, parole officers can. Probation officers are not armed, parole officers are. So there's some fundamental differences in how the two systems work. And I just covered all of that, so I won't do that again. Okay. Parole officers in Colorado, at least for right now, are state police officers. That is to say that we can enforce all the rules and laws in the state of Colorado. So if we come across a crime and you're not on parole, can we arrest you? The answer is yes. Now, there is some limit to our scope of authority and what we're supposed to do, but legally we can do that. It's very common for us to see crimes being committed in front of us because we don't look like cops, or to encounter people who are wanted by other law enforcement agencies as we do our daily duties. So the parole division is very large right now. We have in excess of 400 officers statewide. We have about 40 officers in the Colorado Springs office. They are spread up into different divisions depending on their specialty. We have officers who work standard parole cases. We have officers who work in community corrections. That's the halfway houses that we supervise right now. We have 2 primary halfway houses in the Springs, but we have them scattered all through the state. And we have what's called the youthful offender system. Does anybody know what the youthful offender system is? It's okay if you don't. All right. Youthful offender system, or YOS. In Colorado, we have basically 2 levels of corrections. We have the adult corrections and we have youth corrections. Youth corrections is DYC, the Division of Youth Corrections. But in the adult side of the house, we have what's called youthful offender system. Those are people who commit crimes, are convicted of crimes while they are not yet an adult. But because of the severity of their crime, they're tried, convicted, and sentenced as adults even though they're not adults. So we have people of all ages who were tried and convicted of crimes as adults even though they're not adults, okay? We can't just put them in adult prison because they're not adults, right? So we have to have some special way to deal with that. Typically, these offenders are very, very, very violent, and it's not uncommon that their victims are their family. So we have to have a special way to deal with that and a special way to supervise them. So we have specific officers that just do that. And I don't expect you to remember all this, but it's just so that you understand how the system works. Okay, the parole officers were employed by the state of Colorado. We work for the Department of Corrections. But the conditions that people have to live under while they're on parole are set by the Colorado Board of Parole. That's an independent body. They don't work for us. We don't work for them. They are all appointed by the governor and confirmed by the state senate. And they have the ability to do things with sentencing and to release people early, things that control their supervision that we can't do. If a parolee commits a violation, it's not the parole officer that sends them back to prison if that happens. It's an action of the parole board. So we have this independent body that supervises what parole officers do. So right now, these numbers are somewhat dated. They're actually higher right now, but just in general terms, we have about 1,700 inmates in halfway houses across the state. We have about 1,100 inmates on intensive supervision, and our target capacity is, for those programs, is 11.5% of the inmate population. So 11% of those people who you think are in prison are really on the street right now. They're living in halfway houses or being supervised by parole officers on the street. Because we do have inmates on the street. It's kind of confusing. It's just a classification level. They have not yet earned the right to be fully trusted in the community, so they're still considered to be inmates. Different sets of rules for them as far as conduct is concerned. YOS, we have, as I said, we've got to segregate those people somehow. They have their very own prison for youth offenders. It's located in Pueblo. And we have at least one YOS officer in every region or office, whereas a regular parole officer may supervise as many as 100 parolees. YOS officers do like 10 because their needs are so much higher. They need daily supervision. They need to be supervised a lot because they're very young and they have issues with being on their own. In some cases, they can't be on their own. So we have to take care of that. Okay, so just a real brief overview, I should say. The types of people that we supervise, we have inmates, which we refer to as intensive supervision inmates. We have regular parole, and we have intensive supervision parole. Typically on intensive supervision parole, these are people that are wearing electronic monitoring, that is to say ankle bracelets for whatever reason. They have supervised curfews, and their contact standards are much higher. It could be because they're violent, it could be because they're brand new to the community, it could be a lot of reasons, but they're a lot more work for the parole officer than as a regular parole inmate. And you can move back and forth between these. If you're an inmate, you move out of inmate status to parole, your rights change, the laws change, a lot of things change with regard to how we supervise you. But at the end of the day, those are our three basic types of people. Not really germane to going through this, but just so you understand what we're looking at. We also have specialized caseloads for offenders who have mental illnesses. So do you think, show of hands, do you think that we probably have a large portion of our population that has a mental illness of some kind? You would be correct. It used to be so large that we had a prison dedicated to offenders with mental illness. That was closed for budgetary reasons. And we used to have specific officers trained to deal with mental illness because we had so many people who had mental illness. They need to be handled just a little bit differently. Currently, the unit that I supervise consists of the sex offender unit, the interstate compact unit, and some regular parole people. The sex offender unit is one of our highest needs populations. They get the most supervisions of anybody. That can include regular sex offenders or sexually violent predators. And that is a term which is adjudicated by the court. So because I supervise the sex offender unit, I always like to ask this question. Somebody tell me what it means to be a sex offender. Anybody? Nobody? Come on, somebody's got to have a guess. Yes? A sexual assault conviction, that's good. Okay. What other things could define a sex offender? Public indecency, that's very good. A lot of people forget about that, but you're absolutely right. Anybody else? Okay, well, let me just throw out an example to you. If I said that an offender was a sex offender and he was convicted of child pornography, what image does that conjure up in your mind? What do you think that means? Anybody? Pictures of kids with their clothes off, and probably under the age of 18. Okay, good. That's good, actually. That's very close. Anybody else want to take a stab at it? Or what does it mean to be convicted of child pornography? Okay, possessed it or promoted it. Okay, that's good. So, just as an example, if I tell you right now, if I look at you and I say, okay, do me a favor, don't think about a gray horse. What's the first thing you do? Think about a gray horse, right? Because you got to think about it to not think about it. So every single one of us has something in our brain that says, this is the image I get when I think of that. So if I ask most people, what does it mean to be a child pornographer, the answer I get is something like, well, they had pictures of little kids that were naked, or pictures of little kids being assaulted, or something like that. Okay, that's pretty close. I had a case not too long ago that looked like this. Guy walks in my office, I said, how old are you? He says, I'm 21. I said, how old were you when you went to prison? I was 18. What were you convicted of? Possession of child pornography. Okay, in your case, what does that mean? And he looked at me and he said, well, it's like this. I had a long-term relationship with my girlfriend who was under 18. She took pictures of herself naked and sent them to me on her cell phone. Her parents found out about it, called the police. I went to jail. It was absolutely true. His girlfriend was 16 at the time that this happened, took naked pictures of herself, texted them or sent them to this guy on his cell phone. Mom or dad came home, found her phone, picked it up for whatever reason, looked at it, said, ah!
And he's a sex offender.
And and now he's labeled as a sex offender. There are some specific rules that we don't have time to get into about sex offenders, but I give you that example because it's not usually the image you conjure up in your brain when you hear sex offender. Does that make sense? Usually you think of this heinous thing. You don't think of, oh, my girlfriend or boyfriend sent me naked pictures, that's cool. I didn't know I'd go to jail for that. And in some cases, the answer is you absolutely can't. Just so when you approach people who are in the system and you hear them give you something, don't assume that you know what that means. Does that make sense? Because their conviction may conjure an image in your brain that is not reality. Okay, we also have a specific gang unit that supervises people who are actively in gangs, and typically they're violent gang members. We have interstate offenders, and basically the short version of that is that if you're convicted of a crime in another state, you can petition to be allowed to serve your parole in our state or any other state. It's a series of states that have come together called the Interstate Compact. And you can say, hey, yeah, you know, I went to California, I committed a crime as an example, and I was convicted there, but I really am from Colorado. That's where my family is, that's where all my support is. Can I do my parole time in Colorado? And if you meet the criteria and California says okay and we say it's okay, you can end up here. So we actually have officers that have to specialize in this because they have to not only know our laws, but the sending state's laws. And if those people commit a violation, they can be sent back to the state they came from. So that's a very specialized thing that we do that requires a lot of legal knowledge. So right now, this number is much higher, but we have about 10,000 people that we supervise on a daily basis across the state. We have 400 sworn officers in about 22 different offices. And that's statewide. We have people scattered all over the place. We have one-man offices down in, the middle of nowhere where they basically are, out in the middle of nowhere, and that's the only way they can supervise offenders, or we have large offices in the metro area with as many as 70 officers in one place. Just depends on the demographics. Okay, so I'm going to stop there real briefly, and I'm going to start this discussion, which is really the reason why you're here. So in the years I've done this, I've been fortunate to have some really great people come up and share with you their life and things they've gone through. So because I'm probably the only guy in the room with a badge and a gun, I get to make the rules. Does that sound fair? Okay. They're not scared, but anyway. So I just say that because Mr. Martinez does let me moderate the room, so I get to set the rules. So here's what the rules are for this discussion. Each one of my speakers today is going to get up and they're going to tell you about themselves. And they're going to spend about 10, 15 minutes telling you about themselves. I don't censor it. I don't tell them what to say. I don't tell them what not to say. They are independent human beings that get to choose. So they're going to get up, and each one of them is going to give you a 10 or 15 minute or 5 minute or 2 minute or whatever they feel like speech about who they are, how they came to be in the Department of Corrections. And they're going to tell you whatever they want to tell you. When we're done with all that, we're going to open this up and we're going to let all of you ask questions. So be sure and take notes. This is Mr. Tony Rogers, and he'll go first. Thanks.
Good morning. You young people are one thing, I want to get one thing perfectly clear. Roger told you that his specialty was sex offenders, and none of us are on his caseload. Okay, so let's get that perfectly clear.
That's not entirely true.
Red is, okay, so you young folks are the face of the future of corrections, law enforcement, making the rules and all that. So I'm going to do this a little differently. And after I introduce myself and give you my little spiel, I'm going to pick some people out in the audience and ask them what made them choose this career or this path. And First of all, my name's Tony Rogers. I'm 39 years old. And, I did 29 years in prison as a habitual offender. I used to like to steal people's jewelry. I used to like rob jewelry stores and put pretty bling bling stuff on, you know. So, but I did it a number of times. So I got convicted of what is called the Habitual Criminal Act, or a lot of you may know it as the Repeat Offenders Act, whatever. And during the course of my 29 years, I realized that life was a heck of a lot better on the outside than it was on the inside. My body was there, but my mind, my spirit, and my imagination were never locked up. So I have a couple of quotes that I'd like to say. Oh, okay. I told you not to interrupt me, didn't I? Anyway, I have a couple of quotes that I'd like to throw out. One is, treat a person as they are, and they'll always remain as they are. Treat a person as they can and should be, and they'll become all they can and should be. Just keep that little tidbit with you. And the other one is the SOME, sum of an individual, is not the SUM of an individual. So my past does not define me. I consider myself an upstanding citizen of the United States of America. I pay taxes. I regret that I made some bad choices along the way, and I've paid my price, and I hope that that's the way people view me. Impression is a big, big part of life. If I were not in this room and some of you saw me walking down the street, you'd probably think that I was a dog catcher or but anyway, looks are deceiving. If you didn't know that I was an ex-convict or an ex-offender or whatever you choose to label it, I don't think that you would even think that I was one. You know, so what people do, what people have done, does not define that individual. I'm as upstanding a citizen as anyone in the audience right now. I wasn't years ago, but now I am. I saw the errors of my ways, and I decided to do something about it. And now I try to give back to the community. I hope that I say something here this morning that will impress upon you that as you embark upon your careers, don't just think about locking criminals up and putting them away and forgetting about them. You know, temper justice with mercy. And prisons are a good thing. There are a lot of people that I'm glad they're in prison. You know, so there's appropriateness on both sides of it. And now I want to ask a few of you people why you chose to embark upon whatever career that you're going to go on. And the first one is going to be this young lady right here. She seems to be pretty. Very good. Sir? As politicians, you're gonna have to deal with those people. So it's important that you not just put them in and let them out. You know, and think about all the stuff in between. And that's about all I have to say this morning. And good luck to all of you in whatever you choose to do.
My name's James Close. When I was 18 years old, my brother, who you'll hear from here in a little bit, and I got into a fight in a park with 6 Japanese students. We were convicted of, 28 counts? 28, 29 felony counts, somewhere around that range, and both sentenced to 75 years in prison. I was the very first person in the state of Colorado to be charged, tried, and convicted by jury of the hate crime law because we were white and they were Japanese. I did 20 years in prison, ended up learning the law myself, and found that we were under an illegal sentence. All motions, went back in, they ended up reducing our sentences both to 30 years each. We got out, did our parole, we're both completely free and clean of the system now. One of my biggest issues I've always had with the system, whether it be parole, prison, any of it, is that they do not provide the correct classes for inmates. As Tony stated, guys are coming out of prison. They're giving these guys programs like janitorial services. How many of you think anybody's gonna go out here and support a family doing janitorial work, cleaning a toilet? They're giving them computer classes. Anybody who knows about computers knows they change every day. By the time a guy gets out of prison after doing a computer class after a year, everything he learned is obsolete. It does him no good. One of the things that needs to change is they need to put more things like welding, mechanics, things like that in there. I took welding in there. My average job right now, because of the skills that I learned starting in there and then learned on the streets, my average job starts between $20 and $30 an hour now from taking that course while in prison. They don't do that. They take these, as I stated, janitorial, business, all that stuff changes too fast. The drug and alcohol classes they give in there, same thing. They give these guys these classes, they make them wait forever to get into them. And sometimes by the time they actually get a chance to get into them, they're being released to the streets. They're not teaching guys in prison how to cope with this out here. They're not giving them education to come out here and take care of their families. Many, many, many women in the system have kids. Many have families out here they have to support for when they walk out of here. They're not getting that. So the only thing they know to do is pick up their gun again and try to do what they got to do. Many addicts are coming out. They're not being treated the way they should be. So when they come out of here, out of prison, they're coming out here and going right back to that addiction. The reason for that is because they're stuffing them in there and they're not giving them what they need to fight that addiction. Okay? So I'm going to tell you this. Whatever you choose to do in your career, whether it be law enforcement, politicians, whatever, keep a couple things in mind. First of all, not every person's guilty. Okay? As a DA, as a cop, whatever, you have a responsibility to make sure that even though you're enforcing the law, is it proper for that law to be enforced? Just because somebody says, hey, he did that, doesn't mean he did. Investigate it correctly. Make sure you know what you're doing. And number two is, if you go into politics and you decide you want to make a change in the system and everything, make sure you do it for the right reasons. Make sure you attack what needs to change within the system. Anybody can be thrown in prison. It's how they come out that matters. I've been through anger management class 6 times. Because at one time I was violent. I went to prison, didn't follow the rules, completely tatted out my body. I broke every rule I could break whenever I could break it. I was constantly getting assaults, constantly getting fights. I was actually considered to be what was on there as STG, Security Threat Group. At that time, I didn't care. I changed. I got me some education, I come out. I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Living a good life. And it's because of people like this right here. Not so much Red, I don't get to see him and talk to him as much, he lives up in Denver. But I spend practically sometime every day with my little brother. And this guy right here has been like a stepdad to, don't act up. Kind of like a stepdad to my brother and I. We've known him a better part of 20 years, 25 years. We've known him and done time with him, and then we spend a lot of time out here together with him. Yes. But, so, that's basically what I have to say for now. Thank you.
I just wanted to interject something for those of you going into corrections or prosecution or something. One of the things that doesn't get considered much is what happens when you have a guy who's a very productive member of society.
And we walk out to the garage, he's driving this Subaru, no hubcaps, and bald tires and a broken windshield. And I said, "What's this?" 12 years of student loans. Anyway, you don't think about that with doctors, right? You go to school all those years, don't make any money while they're doing it, right? Right. So I looked at that and changed my entire paradigm on doctors. I said, "What do you mean you're driving this? Where's the Mercedes?" Oh, Tony's got it. But no, where's the Mercedes? He says, "I don't got one." I said, "Why?" He says, "I'm going to be paying off my student loans for the rest of my life, it seems like. And I'm making a lot of money." Okay, now here's the question. What happens when that guy goes to prison? Guess what? The first thing that happens is the state goes, "Oh, you're a felon." They take away his license to practice medicine. Took you 12 years? Yeah? 4 years of school, 8 years learning how, right? What's he going to do for a living after the state takes away his license to be a doctor? Commit suicide. Very high percentage of people do exactly that. And it's just not medical doctors, it's dentists, veterinarians, people in the medical field that we need a lot of right now. So he didn't commit suicide, but you know what he was doing when I supervised him? He was a janitor. Do we really want medical doctors cleaning toilets? How can we possibly, if you can get into med school, which is really simple, right? Yeah. Okay. So if you can get into med school, that's hard enough. Then you got to pay for med school, and then he had his own private practice, making a couple bucks. Very successful. All his patients loved him. He commits a felony that has absolutely nothing to do with medicine. He'll never do it again. So one of the things is these guys talk and you listen and you go back and you do your homework and you write term papers. One of the things you might consider is, what effect does that sentence have on a guy like that? Is he ever going to be a doctor again? And the answer is no. Because our standard of justice is that in the United States you will not be a doctor again because we can't be trusted because now you're a felon. So something to think about when you're studying corrections is, what does the effect of that sentence have on a life like that? I'm not saying he didn't deserve to have some sanction imposed. Just, that's something to think about as you go through this discussion and you go through your education, is to think about, how does that now impact the rest of the world? Because if this guy had a private practice, he might have 200-300 people, I don't know, that he saw on a regular basis and provided medical care to. And now, all those people are without a doctor. Is that the right outcome? I don't know. But you are the guys who are going to make policy and make law and do that going forward. The old guys are going to sit and watch. And you know, as you watch all these protests on TV, oh, the police are this, the police are that, you know, the police don't make the laws. They just enforce them. So if you want to affect change, you've got to go change the law, right? And some of those laws are the laws that say things like, I don't care if you were a very effective, very good medical doctor. You now have this flag on your envelope, on your file, and because of that, you'll never do this ever again. Is that fair? I don't know. You guys are going to have to decide that. So I just wanted to interject that real quickly, that as we talk about sentencing and we talk about programs and train people in prison, as he just alluded to, what do we do with the guy who's already been through 12 years of school? Are you going to teach him how to be a janitor? Is that really the right use of that resource? Don't know. That's just something to think about.
Everybody hear me all right? Yeah. All right. Hey, my name is Red Thorpe.
age of 17, I dropped out of school, went in the Marine Corps. During that time, there was a draft for Vietnam. And so I'm a Vietnam vet. When I went at 17, I spent over 2 years in the service, got out, did a whole lot of drugs and drank a whole lot of alcohol. And during that time, I made some bad choices and decisions. At the age of 22, I was involved in a drug deal, and it went bad, and I killed somebody. I got a life sentence, first-degree murder. That was at the age of 22. At the age of 47, they let me out. But during that time, my first probably 15 years in prison, and some of these guys that knew me, I was nothing nice. Nothing nice. The way I thought, the way I behaved did not change. I had more victims in the penitentiary. On all kinds of levels. You had something that I wanted, I took it from you. And if you didn't want to give it to me, then I stabbed you and I took it from you. That's the kind of person I was. I didn't take no shit off nobody, but I dealt a lot of it out. And hope you didn't like it. Hope and prayed you didn't like it. Because I wanted to hurt people. That was my thing. Is to cause havoc. I sold drugs in prison. One day, this is out of many times, I was in the hole. They call it the hole. Solitary confinement. And the warden came down to my cell, and he said, "Hey, Red," he remembered me when I was 22, young. And he said, "Man, we're growing up in here." And he said, "One of two things are going to happen to you. Either you're going to die of old age in prison, a whole group of guys are going to get together and kill you." During that first 15 years, I was stabbed 3 different times. People tried to kill me. It was dog eat dog, and only the strongest survived. I'm still here. Mama T. And he came down to my cell, and when he talked to me about that, he said, "Man, you need to do something to change your life, man. Because I don't want to see you dead. I don't want to see you die of old age in here." So, he goes, "You think about it. Think about what you want to do. If you want to do something positive with your life," he said, "I'll do whatever I can. I'm the warden. I'll do whatever I can to help you accomplish that." So I told him, "All right." A couple days later, he came back to my cell. And he called me out. He opened the door. Him and I were talking. And he says, "Well, Red, what do you want to do?" I said, "Man, I'd like to get my GED. That's what I want to do." He said, "Okay. Pack up your stuff. You're out of here within the hour." So I was back in the main line again. As soon as I got all my stuff into the cell block, the officer said, "Hey, they're waiting for you at the school." you expecting me? Hey, I heard you want to get your GED. I said, yeah. Man, it took me 2 years to get that damn thing. I couldn't pass that math portion to save my life. But I got it. I did. Well, you know, that felt really good to get that GED. And there was a junior college, Otero Junior College in La Junta. They were coming into the prison and offering classes. So I signed up for some college classes. And it took a couple of years, and I got my associate degree. And through Otero Junior College. I thought, wow, man, that felt pretty good. Think about it. Man. So I was checking around, and so I got a bachelor's degree. Went back to school, got a bachelor's degree in business with a focus in accounting. I hated math. I'm up for the challenge. And that felt really good. Well, somewhere along that time, the way I started thinking and treating other people changed. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong now, I'm in prison. I can turn violent at a drop of a hat. But I didn't go out looking for it. And it's just, I figured, well, you know, when I come across situations that I found myself in, I found that I could intellectually get through that without picking up a knife and stabbing somebody and being done with it. That's usually how I handle issues. And so getting that bachelor's degree was pretty cool. Damn, what did Jim do? What did Red do? He went back to school again and got an MBA. I started at Fort College, what was that, CU? CSU. Back then, they would videotape the classes, so I was always a week behind, and send them in, and I would watch the class and do my homework assignments, and the warden let me use a computer, but I couldn't get on the internet. But I could do my homework assignments and save them on those discs. 3.5.
That's a long time ago.
We ain't having it in the museum around here. And I would save my homework assignments on that and send it in to the college. And so I ended up getting my MBA. Then one day they came to me after 25 years, told me on a Friday, Red, you're getting out Monday. I already seen the parole board. I saw him twice while I was locked up. I take that back. I did see him twice. And the last time I saw him when I was locked up, I said, hey, I said, man, I'd like, show me a little love, just anything. So what they did is they said, you need a transitional period. We're going to send you to a halfway house, work release, community corrections. I said, oh, okay, cool. Told me on Friday, I was getting out Monday. I was already in my mind, unlike Papa T, my heart, mind, body, and soul, man, was in the penitentiary. Everything was there. That's what I knew. I mean, guards, they retire and then up to my cell. Hey, are you Red Thorpe? Yeah. Hey man, my dad told me to look you up. My dad's so-and-so. Now their kids are coming in to work. Man, I'm getting old. So I got out in 2003. I have an MBA. I'm cleaning toilets at a motel, replacing fixtures, unclogging toilets, shampooing carpets, and I'm making like $8.50 an hour. And I'm one happy camper. Scared to death. Scared to death. I go to work every day. There were times where I wanted to go back to the joint because I couldn't handle it. Everything was too fast. They didn't have computers when I got locked up. They didn't have cell phones. You come out to all this stuff, and it was hard for me, difficult. And so I went back to school because that's all I knew. That was my comfort zone. Going back to school, keeping my face in the books. And now, Dr. Jim Thorpe. Got my doctorate. And I worked at, after working as a janitor, I worked for a couple of law firms. And then I worked for the state of Colorado as a paralegal with the Alternative Defense Council. And I worked for them for a few years. And then I got a job, so now listen up. When a felon tells you, hey man, I can't find a job, man. You know, I'm a convicted felon and blah, 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 blah. I got no sympathy for them. That's bullshit. Because my next job after that, I worked for the Department of Defense. Yeah. I worked for them for 3 years. Then we got caught in a BRAC, a base realignment and closure. And they put a list together of bases every year to close to save money. And my base was on that list. And the president signed off on it, and they closed it, and they moved my function to Indianapolis. Well, I didn't make parole. I'm still classified as an inmate. I see the parole board every year out here, and they tell me, give us another year, Fred. Give us another year. Okay. No problem, I'm out here. I'm free. I can eat a steak whenever I want. Then I went to work for a college up north. I started out as an adjunct. Then stayed there for, when I left there I was there about 7 years. When I left there, I was a department chair with a business and accounting. And they sold the college, started laying people off. So I just was being proactive, went out looking. Now I work for the Department of Interior. And it's a good job. And part-time, I teach graduate level classes at a university up in Denver. So, and I still haven't made parole, damn it. So it's been, what, 37 years? 37. 37 as being an inmate. 25 on the inside, 12 out here.
change. They can. They can change. I'm still getting used to things out here, even after 12 years. I can count the people I know. I should say, let me reword that. I can count my friends on one hand that I've met over the last 12 years. And have that many left over. I have 0 friends. 0. I mean, I know a lot of people. Don't get me wrong. I know a lot of people. Not one person has ever been to my house. Not one person has ever came by my house. Hey, just thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing. Or, most people that know me don't even know my situation. They don't. So, now, I work those jobs, I go back into the prison facilities, I talk to guys in there about choices and decisions and how they can change. Venues such as this, I do the same. That's a wrap. Thanks, guys.
Couple of things that the Department of Corrections is changing is some of our treatment programs inside. We're now heavily involved in a program called Thinking for a Change, which is basically teaching people how to restructure their thoughts from criminal to pro-social. And we've also got a program called 7 Habits, which you've seen on the outside, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. We actually have, the state of Colorado has been given permission by Franklin Company to take that program. And we've rewritten it. We have two programs now. One is 7 Habits on the inside, which we were allowed to rewrite the curriculum specifically for offenders in prisons. And now we have a program called 7 Habits, Highly Effective Parolees. We're the only state in the nation that Franklin Covey has given us the right to change that curriculum and teach that program. Tony and Howie both are core group members in our 7 Habits of Highly Successful Parolees program.
May I interrupt you for a
Yes.
second, Professor?
Sure.
It's 7 habits of highly effective. Highly successful.
So you're correct, I said it wrong. So that they're in that program, and what you may have heard in his story during there was, these guys never get credit for anything that they do. They're always seen as criminals and offenders, and that's just kind of it. When we do a graduation ceremony for somebody who makes it all the way through 7 Habits, it's a big deal. And we bring their family and their friends, and we buy a pizza and a cake, and they get to walk up, and we take their picture and shake their hands, and they get a certificate. It's a big deal. So to hear somebody get through every degree known to man, it's a big deal. And that's how lives get changed, is by those things taking place. So right now, we're in the process of changing most of our curriculum over to what's referred to as evidence-based practices. That is to say, what are we doing to help change behavior that actually works? What does evidence say actually works? And so we're changing some of those programs that he'll probably tell you, it was, and as I said earlier, it's open the door, throw them in, lock the door. Well, that's good. Now what do we do? We won't go have coffee, I guess. We're actually looking at trying to make effective use of that time now, which has not been our focus in the past. So now, finally, you can't hide any longer. Howie Close is going to talk.
How many of you guys have had a bad day this week? Last week, in the last 7 days. Maybe an argument with a significant other, financial issues, maybe your car broke down.
Oh, except that transmission went out.
I slammed my 2014 Dodge Ram into the guardrail on I-25 at 65 mile an hour on Tuesday night. Can you believe that one? We have the best justice system on the planet. America does. I absolutely believe that. What you guys want to do with your futures is a noble endeavor. I absolutely believe that. The biggest problem with our system is none of the stuff you heard these guys talk about. The biggest problem with America's justice system is human beings. Because we're crazy. Right? The ones that you guys might help lock up, the ones that will be your peers and will help you lock us crazy people up, they're a little bit cray too. The reason is we all suffer from the same problem. We have bad transmissions. We have bad spouses. We have bad boyfriends and girlfriends. We have bad financial situations. And we carry that stuff into what we do. And it kind of informs who we are in the moment. I don't know that that's ever been a problem. I love our justice system. But for those of you guys who have done some advanced math classes, let's do a little math. 17 years old, 92nd Street. The 6 people we beat up had cuts and bruises, not even a broken bone. We got 75 years apiece. We should have died in that box. You guys, I think the reason why Roger said this is a unique experience for you, there's not a guy sitting up here on this stage that didn't contemplate dying in prison. And some of us got real close to that actually happening to us. We were supposed to die in prison, all 4 of us. And we get to be here, and we get to talk to you. And that's a huge privilege for us. I hope you know the reason we don't need to be paid. We enjoy being able to do this because I don't know why that's funny. It's funny. Yeah, but the reason we enjoy doing this is because maybe possibly we will have a part in shaping how you go about your career. Whether it's law enforcement, whether it's legal, whether it's being a judge or a politician, all of those people are shaping corrections in this state. And if you guys stay here and you do these kinds of jobs, you will shape the future of corrections in this state. And it's about 85 or 90% of the people in prison right now will be getting out in the next 5 years. 85 to 90% of the people incarcerated in Colorado right this minute will be out and in your communities in the next 5 years. And how the people that have the jobs that you're hoping to get later on deal with those 85 to 90% will dictate kind of what they, well, not dictate, but will certainly influence the way those people look when they get out. We grew up in a time when corrections in Colorado was about warehousing. It wasn't about rehabilitation. I think things have changed a lot in the last 5 years in the Department of Corrections. But we went in and stayed in for a long period of time where their only function was just to keep us in. They didn't care if we grew. What Red did with his life, he did on his own. By the way, I promise you, his college wasn't free. Someone paid for that, especially FSU, or I'm sorry, CSU. I got the floor of Seminoles on my mind. Right? These guys started with us with that. But CSU wasn't free and it wasn't cheap. Someone paid for that. And contrary to popular belief, inmates don't just get stuff for free. If they have a TV in their cell, they bought it. If they have tennis shoes, they bought it. If they have anything extra, besides their 3 meals a day, they had to pay for that. That means they either worked for it in the prison at 60 cents a day, do that math, or they had their family members send them money, but someone paid for that. Nothing was free. The reason I say that is because the folks that do come out on the other end, when the VA, they really worked hard for that. It wasn't easy. He wanted to make changes. He made choices. There's guys just like him that were evil, violent creeps inside, and they're going to get out and they haven't changed. That scared me. I don't know if that scared you guys. So you guys have an opportunity moving forward take the greatest legal system, justice system in the world and make it better. Or you can make it worse. Or you can just float and do the status quo. There are people, so we all grew up hating cops, honest, or am I being honest? None of us like the popo. We were anti-authority. They all suck. The popo asked us to come here today, and we're here. Stuff changes. Because at some point we realize, just like there are some good people that get convicted of some bad stuff, there's also good people that are on the other side of that imaginary line, and they're just doing their job. Some of them aren't so good. Some of us aren't so good. But some of us are, and some of them are. And so, one of the cool things I get to do now, so 20 years, I was in 20 years and 5 months, his case kind of got us our time cut. I had to file for, what was that motion I filed? 35. Yeah, I filed something, equal protection, to get the same time cut. I got it 7 months later and I got out. I've been out for 4.5 years. I've been off parole for 2.5 years. Since the day I got out, I had these wild ideas while I was in. That I was going to do this stuff that is illegal in the state. Can't do it. All the rules say you can't do it. I went to the powers that be and I asked them for permission, and they said yes. So for the last 4.5 years, I've been going back into prisons. I'm a pastor at Untitled Chapter. It's a 6,000 member church here in town. I'm not the pastor. I'm just on staff with about 12 of them, and I am the director of their jail and prison ministry. And since the day I got out, I've been going back into jail, and I've been dealing with offenders in the community as they come out to try to help them. So when I was arrested at 17, at 19 I went to the most violent prison in this state, Lyman. It's been that way since the day it opened, will be till the day it closes. It's just a slaughterhouse, basically. I got there when I was 19. One of the first faces, one of the first people I met there was this young fella here, and he was a bit of a mentor to guys. You know, the young guys come in, some of the older guys kind of take them under their wing and say, hey, this is how you don't get dead. And so you either listen or you get dead. And that's just kind of the way the system works in there. And so people kind of take you under your wing, teach you the ropes, kind of tell you, you know, how things are and how they work, and he kind of did that. And then after I was out and doing the job I was doing after 29 years, he got out. And it's funny that Red said that earlier, that he was, you know, this is a guy who's not afraid of anything. There's not a human being on the planet that this dude's afraid of. All 4 of us were just too stupid to be scared of anything or anyone. But when they come to you and they say, we're letting you out, we're like 5-year-olds standing in traffic. We were a mess, all of us. And so this guy gets out after 29 years, 3 decades, 29 years in prison. He gets out and he's terrified. And we'd sit at Starbucks downtown and cry at him.
Can I interject something for you? When I got out, he gave me a cell phone. When I went to prison, you know what a cell phone was? You ever seen an old army movie?
Pull mine out of your pocket and show it to him. He stole mine right off the table and thinks I don't know. Go ahead, show him.
I'm not as good as I used to be. But anyway, he gave me this little phone. Think about like that. And I was talking on it, and I was doing like this. I listened, and then I put it and he was laughing at me. He was like, you don't have to do that. Just talk and listen. But it was so small until I figured when I listened, I had to put it there and talk, So. But when I went in prison, cell phones were about this tall, And above that, where, you had the.
Back on the Eiffel Tower.
But, yeah, it was a scary thing, getting out, but he took care of it.
I guess my fundamental message is we're all human beings. Some of us have made some really ridiculous mistakes. Some of you have made some really ridiculous mistakes. That if your dirty laundry was aired for everyone to see, you'd wish you were in prison to be able to hide from the shame. We made mistakes. We're not perfect even now. We're just better. And we got a lot of growing to do. And I think the best thing you guys can remember as you move forward, if you stick with the track that you're on and you end up doing stuff, you're gonna have people's lives in your hand. Everyone that knows about our crime realizes that we are probably victims of a system. We deserve to be punished. Don't get it twisted. We went up into that park that night. We picked a fight with innocent people. We did what we did. We deserve to be punished for that. However, how much is the question. I don't play the victim. I got too much work to do. I don't have time to be upset with a system that maybe got it wrong. If they'd have known all the stuff I didn't do, they'd have buried me into that spot. The reality is, whether it was fair, the justice system rarely has much to do with the truth, fairness, or justice. It really doesn't. It has to do with agendas, because we're humans, and we all have those. Right now, I have an agenda, is to try to tell you guys that we're all humans. It's not a horrible agenda. We all have agendas. At any given moment, you guys are going to have a direction you want to take a thing. Live by your conscience. Don't let the system eat you up. The system can do that. You can do the status quo. You can just move in and everyone says, hey, this is how you do it. Prison was like that. Hey, this is how you do it. This is how you get along. For a long time, I lived that system. I was not a nice guy. None of us were really nice guys. But then something clicks in you. Like with Red, something clicked in me in 1996. And I'm just done. I don't have to come out of my house with a knife stuck in my sock wondering which one of y'all I'm going to have to kill because you disrespected me. I don't have to live that way. Yeah, that's what the system says I have to do, but I don't have to do that because the system doesn't drive me. It doesn't run me. I'm my own man. You're your own girl. You're your own guy. You're gonna be moving into a system that's going to tell you things have to stay the way they are. Don't listen. Dream big. All of the stuff I do, they hate it when I say this. Everything I do for a living and for a hobby breaks every rule they have. It really does. I'm still, to this day, not qualified to do all of the things I do. And I get to do them anyway. I just kind of had this dream, and I just kind of started putting it into place. I got free reign. I can walk into any prison to this day. I work at ComCore all the time. I've got offenders, ex-offenders in my truck, in the car right now. Truck's in the shop, but I get to do things that no one else gets to do. Because we made a choice a long time ago. Each one of us made a choice. I don't have to be this person that they want me to be. So you kind of are in control of your life. You're in control of your career. Fortunately, some of you will be in control of other people's lives at some point in your career, and you will have to decide what's right. What's right is not always what's legal. And what's legal is not always what's right. Do you know the difference between morality and legality? Sometimes the two are at odds. You're going to choose. So I got one last thing I want to close with. Bro, you with the red hair, black jacket. What are you hoping to do with your life? So the man got up here a minute ago and said, don't judge a book by its cover. Yeah, I'm black and I'm bald, but that don't make me a bad guy, right? He said that, right? That's what I heard anyway. And then he sits down and he whispers in my ear, he's like, you see the redhead dude over there chewing gum? I'm like, yeah. He's like, bet he's gonna be a cop. Judging a book by its cover. But this is a good little lesson in judging the book by its cover. We're really good at pointing out who the popos are. We're really good at pointing out. Good for you, by the way.
There's nothing wrong with that. But that's just how you say.
All right, I have a question for Dr. Red. I was wondering what made you so angry that you wanted to hurt everybody? And when you got out, how did you support yourself going to school?
How I got so angry. I have no idea how that manifested itself in me. And then when I went to prison at 22, I was pretty young. Back then, Buena Vista was a boys' reformatory. And so I went behind the walls. And it was pretty rough back then. And some of the old timers, you know, they gave me a knife and said, sleep, eat, and shower with this thing. And don't take no shit off nobody. So I got into that frame of mind. And it just manifested itself. And your other question, just working the jobs that I had, working at the college, I was able to go to school. And it took me 5 years to get through that school for my doctorate. And, oh, you talking about in the joint? How I paid for school?
Well, both.
Well, I paid for those myself. I didn't have any outside help. And like I said, you know, I sold drugs when I was in prison. And, you know, extortion, things like that.
Thank you.
Can I add a little bit to, you asked him about his anger. It wasn't necessarily anger that he felt. Maybe some of it was, but it's survival. You know, he's a Marine. I'm a Marine. What do they teach Marines how to do? No, they teach you how to defend yourself. But anyway, that's, it probably was not a bunch of anger. When you're in prison, you do what you have to do to survive. So, I don't know.
A lot of parolees come in and they don't have food stamps, they don't have driver's license. If they do have a license, it says very clearly on there that they're a parolee, who's going to hire them when they. So I told John Southers that once when he was at the DOC, and he said, well, this pre-release program will do all that for him. So I'd like to see better parole officers getting back to jobs.
So the way, that wasn't really a question, but let me just kind of, so there's a couple different things going on in Colorado right now. Pre-release is a class that they have in just about every prison in the state. So offenders who are getting ready to get out can take pre-release classes and start to work on researching resources that will be available for them when they get out, like ESF downtown. Then you have re-entry, which is kind of just a little bit of a different entity, and they're starting these re-entry units in 25 of our prisons around the state, where they're trying to catch people who are getting close to getting out and start doing programming, and even their jobs and everything are going to be geared more towards them getting out. So like what happened with Red and my brother and I, and even Tony really, where you're just kind of locked into prison mode, you're not really thinking about the streets, and then all of a sudden one day you're just out. We're trying to get these guys out of the prison mode and get them moving more toward thinking like free people again. And then in every parole office in the state, there's what they call community reentry specialists. They're DOC officers that are stationed to the parole office. Their only job is to help offenders who are on parole get housing, jobs, clothing. So they give out vouchers to ESM. All of the community reentry specialists here in town, and some of them in Denver have my card, so I'll get calls and emails all the time. Hey, can you help this person with rent? Hey, can you get them a bike? Hey, can you get them a job? Hey, can we do bus passes? And so I work very, very closely with the parole office here and the parole office in Denver and the community reentry specialists, just doing all of this stuff. But we use ESM all the time.
There's a little known state law buried off in the traffic code that says that if you are convicted of a felony in Colorado, your driver's license is automatically revoked. And so it's not, there are processes and procedures that you have to go through the Department of Revenue to get your license back. Right now, we've started a program where they should be leaving the facility with a Colorado ID card in their hand. Driver's license is a little bit different because it is, after all, the Department of Revenue handles that. They have to go through a process and spend a reinstatement fee. But the fact that they don't have a driver's license they come out is a residual part of an old state law. So again, what I told you earlier about all laws don't work together and you have a chance to change that, that's one of those things that you could change, is say, hey, just because you went to prison doesn't mean you can't drive a car. And some of those archaic things can be changed.
So I have a question actually, I have two. Was it harder to go, or was it scarier to go in or scarier to come out? And then what were you afraid of when you went in? What were you afraid of when you came
Who was that directed
out?
I'm going to tell you the honest truth. At 18 years old, young, thought I was smarter than what I was. I mean, I had basketball scholarships in 9th grade. So I thought if I was going to go in there and just play basketball, I was terrified. Coming out, my second day at the halfway house, my mom, the first day, my mom bought me one of those little flip phones. My second day, they said, hey, you can go and get a job. I stepped out. I was just like this. I stepped out on the street. There was no staff, no cops. Mommy, come get me. I was scared to death. I had no supervision. I'm out here walking the street. They're telling me, go get a job. And I'm like, well, how do I do that? I had no job skills. So for me, coming out was terrifying.
How did you cope with that?
Family, friends, my brother's wife. First week I was there, she brought me bubble gum because I love bubble gum. My mom, friends came and supported me. And day by day, I just learned something new. I discovered I hate the bus system. I don't take the bus, I've got to walk. So I would walk basically to work and back almost every day that I had to. It was about 7 miles, didn't care, because the bus is just obnoxious. You just learn every day, step by step. Take it slow and learn something new. Don't be scared to ask questions of people. I would walk up the streets and just ask a perfect stranger, is this a payphone? Because they changed them so much, and if you found one, you were lucky. I mean, there was just different things. As an example, that's what I'm saying. It's just little things like that. You just ask somebody. You just take it day by day.
When I went in, I wasn't afraid of anything. I went in older. These guys were teenagers. The first facility I went in was Centennial, which was the maximum security. I met people like Ray. But I was too stupid to be afraid because I got this thing in my mind that I'm a Marine and Marines know no fear, you know. And me and this guy, we lived in the same unit, D unit, and I didn't know anyone in the Colorado system because I wasn't from Colorado, and I had to earn my stripes, you know. But I didn't do mine the way Red did his. I did mine this way, you know. And but when I got out, yes, I was scared to death because for the 29 years that I was in, all I heard were guys that came back in that talked about how tough the system was, how the system was geared for failure. You know, you can't make it out there. Parole officers, all they look forward to is putting you back in jail. So when I got out, I just knew that I had to face these problems, but none of those problems manifested themselves. I had great support. I had this guy, I had my lady, I had quite a few friends, I had my daughter, and here I am. But I was afraid when I got out. But the things that I was afraid of really didn't exist.
business we all went to at a very young age. I mean, we were all four pretty much thrown in to the lines there, right off the bat. And the weird thing about the four guys you got sitting in front of you right now, though, is we all kind of knew how to handle our business, or at least we thought we did. And so we just did that when we had to, and didn't when we didn't. And then when you get out and you're terrified and you don't know what you're going to do next, that's when humanity kicks in. Because if you can survive in the places we grew up surviving in, you can totally handle this out here. This is easy. We didn't know that, but it took us a little while, but we've all got our feet under us. And just, that's what humans do. They survive. They do what they have to do to make it. And if you want to make it right, then you do the right things. If you want to go back, which I deal with a lot of people every day that are making those choices, then you go back. We're just old and we're tired and we want to do something different with our lives. We don't want to die in the box.
Hi. I have one question for either one of you that can answer. I was just wondering, what led you guys to a life of criminal activity? What happened during your childhood or your teenage years? Is there something there, or you guys were just immature making decisions?
Choices.
Choices?
Bad choices.
So did something throughout your life? Did you not know how to take your choices? Did you lack some parenting? Did you lack some education? Is there something missing?
There is a cross-section of human beings in prison. He talked about the guy that was here last year in this room, was a medical doctor. We met guys that had awesome parents. No divorces in their family, grew up in the suburbs, went to great schools, had all the newest clothes, still ended up making a bad choice and went to prison. Sometimes it's just the guy who dates the girl who's a little too young. There's no rhyme or reason. I mean, yes, there are factors that will contribute to criminality and to criminal behavior, but that's not the end-all, be-all. And this guy was a Marine. They were Marines, for crying out loud. You're thinking that's like the best organization on the planet, right?
All Marines.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
You said they were.
They are Marines. But these guys, you would think if anyone's got a chance to make it in the world and do the right thing, it would be someone who learned honor and courage. None of that stuff really matters in the moment. When you're making, you could leave out of here today and you come to a fork in the road. And you take road A or you take road B. Road B could lead you to prison and you don't even know it. And you could be standing there going, no, not me, because my past, none of that matters. We know all kinds of college kids in the joint. Y'all aren't immune. You know what I mean? Just because you had a great life, that doesn't mean you're immune. You're doing awesome, and you've got an entire family. If we just looked at factors, your history seems to suggest you should be a dope fiend and probably in and out of jail. But you're sitting here in college doing the right thing. I want to fight against that. It just says if you had bad parenting or you had some abuse in your life, because I'm looking at one of our presidential candidates who had a really rough upbringing, Ben Carson, and he's the foremost brain surgeon in the world, and he's running for president. And he had a horrible life growing up. But he's making it, and he did something huge with his life.
I just wanted to know about factor, because that's something that I look as a person, and that's the way that I just look at the law enforcement. Like, before we judge somebody, we also have to see what happened, because instead of sending them to prison, we can maybe get them some program, some help, that maybe that's what they need instead of going to jail. So every time I get a chance to maybe learn if you guys have any factor that you think you contribute, like peer pressure or anything.
There are no social or economic barriers that determine who goes to prison, who doesn't go to prison, or who commit crimes. It's choices. You're not always responsible for the things that happen to you, but you're responsible for how you respond to them. And in certain situations, you responded negatively and had to pay a price.
Let me tell you this, man. I'm going to use our man over here that's going to become a cop. All right? You got any friends here with you today? Where that? Raise your hands. If you're his friend, if you know him. You one of his friends? This guy right here? Yes, sir. Check this out, man. You guys ever go out together? You guys will never go out together. You're just friends. Just classmates. Okay? Let's say the two of you decided to go out and get a pizza. He walks up to a guy that he knows, and you're with him. He says, you know what? That dude right there stole my wallet the other day. He walks up and he hits that dude. Bam. That dude falls down and bumps his head. He just got an assault case. You ever heard of complicity? What's complicity? Who knows what complicity is? What's complicity, Matt? Complicity means that you are guilty of the same crime for simply allowing that crime to occur. Basically, it's injustice, which means that your entire police career just came to an end. That's how easy it is to get a case. There is no rhyme or reason to it. You can walk up and boom, you can be with your friend and he see a guy, that dude stole my girl, and start fighting that dude and get an assault case. And because you allowed it to happen, you're just as guilty of having an assault case right along with it. That's how easy it is. There is no rhyme or reason to it, man. It ain't got nothing to do with upbringing, it ain't got nothing to do with that. It's what we do.
I want to know, I don't know if you guys have any whole lot of criminal justice background, but in our criminal justice class, we've been talking about the different theories of how criminals become criminals. So basically, if you say it's choice, and it doesn't really matter, I mean, I understand the factors, but you say it's choice. It's choice to say go road A, go road B. So how would you explain these different theories that theorists and criminal theorists come up with? Like, that's what I don't know if you guys would have an answer for that, but that's a...
Their theories, honey.
Hold on, let's back up for a second. Let's learn.
Exactly.
Right.
That's why I said
mean,
it's
if we're going to
probably
have a
not...
philosophical discussion, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. What is the definition of a criminal? Someone who commits a crime?
Exactly.
What causes someone to commit a crime?
Exactly. That's why I just
way
wanted,
too
you
broad,
want
right?
to bring up those questions. You guys wouldn't have an answer for that, but that's just a question that might...
In the moment, you make choices. Who you are. So he said your past doesn't define who you are.
Right.
True. But your past does inform who you are. And if in your past you've found it easy to make reckless decisions, then you will make reckless decisions quicker than maybe the girl sitting next to you. Because in her past, she didn't. Or maybe she made a reckless decision and learned from it. But there's, in the end, true, I mean, you guys are super young. And I know you're learning lots of cool stuff out of some really fat books. Big long words that none of us could even spell. But let me just say this to you. Bottom line, you got over 100 years of corrections experience sitting in front of you. And every single one of us will tell you the same thing. You live and die by your choices. You live and die by your choices. You live and die by your choices. Are there factors that would cause you to choose differently than maybe one of your peers? Sure. But in the moment, every single one of us changed. We broke out of what everyone would say, well, if you're a creep and you're a crook, we understand that because of where you stayed for all those years and what you went through. But we all went through that and we're not that person. And there's a whole bunch of people that went through the same stuff we went through that didn't figure things out the way we did. We're not special. We're human beings. We just made some different choices in time and space that changed the trajectory of our futures, right? And that really, I don't know. I'm not sitting in your classes, so I don't know what all the factors are that you guys are discussing. But we've seen politicians, we've seen priests. I mean, you see the whole cross section of humanity in jail. Girls and guys, some with really tragic stories, some with really great stories that just made a bad mistake. It happens. And I'm not 100% sure that there is a set rhyme or reason. Obviously, if you had a bad past history, that could contribute. But there are people who had bad histories that didn't go. Nothing is set. So.
Right.
Let's go back to the philosophical side of this for a moment. We sort of collectively agreed a moment ago that what defines a criminal is someone that commits a crime. Now, if you go back and you look on the books, I wonder how many criminals we got out here. When we talk about somebody that commits
That's
a
a
crime.
good point. Show of hands. No, I'm just kidding.
We talk about somebody that commits a crime, that makes it a criminal. In our society, what defines a criminal is someone who commits a crime and gets caught. I think that's a better definition of criminal. Because I'm sure somebody out there smoked some weed and drove a car. You know, that's a crime. That's a crime. You know, so if you've driven under the influence, you've committed a crime. Are you a criminal? Huh? Okay.
Well, I just had another question. I just wanted to bring up that one first. You two say you are Marines, right?
Yes.
Okay, now, I don't know if I heard you say you were Marine before you committed your crime. Were you? You were. Okay, so the question I have is, besides choice, what drove you guys to do that? Was it because you were young and you wanted to adventure and explore what it was like to experiment, or was it literally by choice?
I can't speak for Red.
No, speak for yourself. Yeah, speak for yourself.
For me, it was simply by choice. I mean, I chose to do the things that I did. There were no factors that you could factor into that. I just chose to do the things that I did. I made bad choices.
You're talking about my crime?
Yeah, where you went and, not necessarily the crime committed, but how after you were done with your,
The Marine Corps?
yeah, with the Marine Corps, and then you said you went and you started to do drugs and sell them and whatnot. Was that to experiment? Like, I'm sure there are a lot of other people our age, college students.
Well, it was to feel good and numb. And it distorted my thinking. And, you know, and I'm not going to put what I did, make excuses for that. I did that by choice. And it wasn't because I wasn't held enough when I was a child, or I wasn't breastfed long enough. You know, and I'm not going to blame it on drugs or alcohol. I mean, but what I did by choice. It was my own decision, and I paid for it, and I continue to pay for it.
Well, thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
So the last two questions have addressed the reasons for, basically going into the system. So what I'm more interested in is, do you think that there's a common factor on, like, between the four of you that helped you get out and, really make something of your lives? Because I think it would be marvelous for there to be more people like you to get out, because it's really something incredible.
We hate prison. Seriously, no, you're laughing, but I'm serious. We used to sit around in prison. Many times I talk about how we hated it and how we didn't want to be there. And the one thing that I've always believed is hate takes the most energy. It's a horrible feeling. I hate prison. I don't want to be in prison. I don't want to be told when I can shower, when I can use the phone, when I can go exercise. And for me, that's the thing. I hate prison. It's horrible. I don't want to be in there, and I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to be beating up people like we did when we were kids. We constantly fight, beating up people, getting in trouble. I don't want to be that person. Just because I can fight, just because I'm trained to fight, we both took martial arts, just because we can do that, doesn't mean we got to.
So I have a working theory, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. We all saw, like, kids come in, they have a 3 or 4 year sentence, which means they're going to do a year in prison or whatever. They're going to get out. They know they're getting out. They get out and they're all of a sudden an OG now because they did their time. They made their loans, they put in most of the what we call short timers that come in and get out, they're not better off for the experience. But when you contemplate your death in that place for years, it changes you. And you grow up and you realize the things that used to matter to you, being Mr. Popular on the big yard, being the tough guy, being the shot caller, none of that crap really matters anymore. All of us proved our points. We carried our chips and we did all of that stuff, and at some point you decide enough is enough. And most of the dudes, I would say women too, that have life in our prison system right now, if they were allowed out tomorrow, I would say 99% of them would probably be just as successful as us. It's the ones that go in and go out and go in and go out. They know they're getting out. They know they have a future. They don't change. But when you put somebody in and they spend a few years contemplating the fact that I'm going to die in this ridiculously stupid, awful, horrible place, you're forced to change. Or you die in that stupid, awful, ridiculous, horrible place. And so for those, we sat around for years and said, man, if they just, and we just watched all those people come back and tell us why they couldn't make it out here and how the system's set up for failure. And we all just wanted our one shot. Just give us our one shot. We'll show you how doable it is. And it's, again, we're not special. You just got to come to grips with where you want to spend your life. And what, you guys are all in that place right now, and you're all trying to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your lives. You know, in some ways, you know what you don't want it to look like. Newsflash, if you haven't figured that out, you don't want it to look like. But you're trying to figure out what's my future going to look like. We were stuck in a place where we had no choice. This is our future. There's no end. There's no hope. And then when we got our little ray of hope, we just wanted to make the best of it. We're not perfect. We haven't done it perfectly, but we're still doing it.
You know, it was a determinant thing for me. 29 years of eating turkey bologna, turkey bread, turkey beans, turkey milk. I just refuse to put myself in that position.
Dude, even the turkey was made out of turkey. Horrible.
Well, I'll tell you what, for me, the penitentiary, that's my home. It always will be. Coming out here, it was just like going to another facility. A little different, you know, scary, a lot of new things, but no one could ever threaten me. Well, if you don't do this, we're sending you back to prison. Let's go. That's where all my friends are at. Everybody I know is in there. That's what I know. That's what I know. Yeah, do I have a good education? You bet. Another reason why you can't judge a book by its cover. Not one of you would probably ever guess when you saw me walk in here that I was Dr. Red Thorpe. Not one of you. It's all right though. But for me, the penitentiary, that's my home. I spent all my adult life in there. That's what I know.
Thank you.
We have an old saying, the very best day in the penitentiary is still way worse than the very worst day out here. Straight up, the very worst day out here, a million times better than the very best day in there.
So I noticed that a few of you had different opinions on our justice system. You said we had like a great justice system. You had quite a bit of problems with it, it seemed like, or not a bit, or just...
I don't have a problem with the justice system. I have a problem with the way they're educating inmates once they go into the justice system. When we went through the justice system, they did us very dirty. Our judges told us, you give us a reason, we're going to let you out of prison. We went to what's called a mandatory minimum, which means that basically on our charges, it was the minimum we could get by law. They all said it was bogus, but the elements of our crimes were all met. Okay? I don't have a problem with the justice system. What I believe is that the justice system needs to take a look and say, well, you know what? This is not always necessary to go this far with something. Not every person deserves to go to prison for 100 years or 75 years for something they did. Let's not turn into criminals. Let's not turn a person into a criminal. Just because we broke the law doesn't mean we're criminals. You know what I mean? I just gave a perfect example of how a person can be caught up in something with no intentions of doing it. We got into a fight in the park. Went to prison. They turned us into the criminals we became because of the system. I love our system. As he stated, there are many people that deserve to be in this system. There are one of my very best friends in this world is a guy named Danny Yates. Call him Animal. Guy's a super nice guy. He's also beat the death penalty 3 times in 2 different states and killed 11 people. Should that dude ever see the streets? No, he's a kid. If that dude went around and killed people he didn't like just to do it, no, he don't deserve to be out. So the prisons, we need the criminal justice system. I just feel that there's a lot of changes that need to be made to help people like us that we weren't criminals, we were kids.
So that's kind of what my next question was. What are your opinions on the best part of the justice system and like the worst part, I guess?
Well, I'll tell you what, since I've been out, my POs, parole officers, even though I'm still an inmate, I'm not on parole, I'm assigned a parole officer, have been, and the only reason other than my choice, coupled with that, is I've always had really good parole officers who encouraged me to go to school, go back to school. Hey man, you're doing really good. Just words of encouragement periodically along the way keeps you going in the right path, as well as your choice to do so. So for me, my experience, my parole officers that I've had, outstanding. And you know, I've had opportunities to meet guards that I didn't think were real swell since I got out. And they're now wardens. And I got to meet them on a personal level. Way different than inside.
I mean, that really is the answer. I was on parole for 2 years. I had 4 parole officers. First 2 were amazing. Last one, she has the reputation, whether it's true or not. The offenders spread the rumor about her that she throws more people back in prison than all the other parole officers in our office combined. I had her for a year. She wasn't terribly affirming. she was tough. And so the thing is, that's a problem with a group. I mean, we got a big group of human beings here collected together. No 2 of you are exactly identical in your personalities and the way you deal with a particular person or situation. And I think that's my answer to your question is the good things about the system are there are some really amazing people. The bad thing about our system is there are some really horrible people.
Can you request to have a new parole officer?
You can, but good luck with that.
Oh.
Yeah, my last parole officer I had, I went in for my final meeting with him, sat down, he's like, well, James, you've done pretty good on parole, but I'm going to revoke your driving privileges for the last 30 days just to see if you screw up. So, like, are you kidding me? My job required me to drive at the time. I was a property manager and a paralegal. I had to go to properties and meet homeowners and stuff. How am I supposed to work? He's like, figure it out.
So one of the things that Tony and I do, we know the parole manager in El Paso County, Roger's boss. He's the top cop in our county for parole. So one of the things we'll do in a parole, if you called me on the phone, you said, Howie, I'm really struggling with my parole officer and I can't figure it out. I will liaise. I will go in and sit with you in your next parole officer meeting. And if I truly believe that you're telling the truth, at least to some degree, I can go to her boss or his boss and I can say, hey man, I only got half the story here, but I really think you should look into this. And he's an honest guy, he's a nice guy, and when he says he's going to do something, he does it. I've done that about 4 times where I thought parole officers might have been in the wrong. 3 times there was an adequate excuse for why that was happening. I didn't get everything from the offender I should have gotten. 1 time the parole officer was wrong and he corrected the situation. And I have asked not countless, but many times, I said, is there any way we can give this individual a different PO? And he's looked into it and he's able to do that. When you ask as the offender, it's a lot tougher. When someone advocates for you, it's a little easier. But it's doable, it's just really tough.
Thank you. So mine's not really a question, but I just wanted to thank you guys for your service and I thank you guys for actually coming in as well.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Howie stressed that you really started like studying like your guys' legal issues in order to help reduce your sentence. What drove you to want to do that?
Freedom. I wanted out of prison. I mean, you heard everything we've had to say about getting out, and basically, our lawyers gave up on us. Our lawyers told us, you guys are probably not going to win nothing. And the lawyer I had at the time, who actually is a very good lawyer, she actually is head of the appellate division for Denver Public Defenders now. She's like, James, I can't figure out nothing. And I'm like, well, okay. And I wasn't content to sit in prison for 75 years. You know, so I told my girl at the time, I'm like, hey, I need a couple law books. She got me them, and I started reading, and it was funny because I found a little obscure passage in the book about this big. It was 2 miles. And it basically said that attempt crimes were not mandatory crimes of violence. And 9 of our charges that they ran consecutively, because it was mandatory for them to do, were attempt crimes. And so I followed. But I just didn't want to be in prison anymore. You know, I don't have the same reputation in the system that Red had. I didn't have the same amount of violence in my life that he had, but I had some violence in there. I committed assaults, I committed extortions and things of that nature. I didn't want to live that life anymore. I don't want to be involved in that. I want to be out here being with my family, being with my friends. And like Howie said, prison is not co-ed. You know, that right there is enough to make a man want to get out there. Just saying. So those were my reasons for doing what I did, finding that and getting involved in the courts.
And my second question is for Red. Obviously, you're a very driven person, but you talked about the warden and him coming down and talking to you. Do you feel as if he never came and had that conversation that you'd still be sitting in prison? Or, like, do you think you would have eventually changed for the better on your own?
I'd either still be in prison or dead.
No, like you said, that's the truth. She's like, is it war?
Thank you. So you guys were talking about choice, but I wanted to go on the supportive side. You guys said you got a lot of support when you all got out. I'm not so really sure about you guys, because you didn't really say you got support, but you did say you had some really good parole officers. Well, the rest of you guys, you said you had moms, friends, and wives. Do you think if you wouldn't have had any of their support, they would have just left you out in jail, that you'd be where you are today?
No, we didn't get out because of support. We got out because of...
No. I meant like when you get out, do you think you'd be where you are now?
Yes.
The jobs that you have, without that support?
Yes, most definitely.
Maybe not exactly where we're at now. Would we have still been successful in some form? Probably, because our minds were set on that. The day I got out, my wife and stepdaughter came and picked me up at the prison. We drove home, cloud nine. You have to report immediately to parole. Because of our crime, we're at what they call STG, security threat gang members. Even though we never belonged to a gang, if they think you're part of a hate group, which they thought we were, then that's just the designation we have. So I get to the parole office, I've got the STG white boy gang parole officer. He is a hard-nosed dude because all of the parolees he gets are hard-nosed dudes. And from that moment on, it felt like I had been kicked in the stomach. There was like an inch-thick pack of papers with just rule after rule. He read each one, I had to initial. We did that for an hour and a half. And then I had to go and get an ankle monitor put on and drop a UA. Then I had to go get a CAE case manager and drop a UA. And then I had to go to task and see if I needed any anger management, mental health, or drug classes and drop a UA. When we were done, my wife and I, and she helped, she was with me the whole day. Never saw the inside of my house. We got back in the car after the ankle monitor thing. That was the last thing we did. It was 4 in the afternoon. My wife was in tears. And she looked at me and she's like, Howie, how in the world does anybody do this? What she meant was, we barely got it done. And I had help. She was asking the question, how do they do this? It was exhausting and it was emotional and it was crazy for us. And there's these people that don't have that kind of support, family, or whatever. And that's why I do the job that I do. people that work with me that can't say they don't have support. I'll come find you, I'll pick you up, I'll take you, I'll meet you at the co-ops. We'll go to the prison and pick you up and drive you back to town. We try to do, I have ridiculous teams of people that help me across the state. And we'll do whatever it takes
So do
to
you,
try to help people not be alone and not feel that.
so do you think that statement, that question that your wife asked you is what influenced you to be where you were today?
I wrote the proposal for this program while I was still in prison. No, but that, I mean, that's indicative of why I wanted to do it, because this is hard. I mean, it is hard. There's a lot of hoops for an individual to jump through. And like I said, since I got out, the culture has changed dramatically across the state. Parole is a lot more easy. They're a lot easier to work with these days. They're letting offenders take a week to do all of that stuff instead of having to do it on the first day. So there's things they're doing, realizing that this is tough. It's tough for someone to use the bus and do all of the things they have to do for parole.
Do you feel as if prison makes offenders more violent and or criminal by the association with other offenders and the constant chance of violence in prison? If so, do you think this can be changed?
All things can be changed, but they call prison college. You get an education. You learn how to be a more sophisticated criminal. It can make you violent. You get a young kid that comes into prison, and like James said, prison is not co-ed. Some guys want to make pretty young boys, girls, and so this kid has a choice. He either submits, he get a knife, and they fight. So you get a kid that came in for a simple crime, and he gets pressure. And he decides that he's not going to succumb to that pressure. So he ends up being violent. You know, and whether it can be changed, I just said everything can change, but at the same time, the situation's always going to be there. There are always going to be predators, and there are always going to be prey. So it's just one of those catch-22 things.
We'll have that fight or flight predisposition. It's kind of built into who we are. When you get to prison, you're going to be presented with a choice of fight or flee. And the ones who flee become meat, and the ones who fight stand a chance of surviving without being meat. I've seen people that it's just not in them. They just can't fight. They just can't stand up for themselves. You don't have to fight a lot. You don't even have to fight well. You just have to stand up for yourself. But some people just can't. It's not in them to do it. Others learn to do it, and they do it well. And so, I mean, can prison make you more violent? Absolutely. Is it a necessity? A lot of people would say it was. We all thought it was early on. A lot of people would say, later on, I would say, no, I didn't have to be violent, and I wasn't for a lot of years there at the end. I could live my life and be me, and I don't have to answer to nobody. And, but there's that, behind that is that idea that can't none of you whoop me, so I don't care, I'm going to live the way I want to live. So there's that weird tension there. But the people who don't fight, they have a very tough time.
Thank you.
I didn't have to fight. I was what they call a shot caller. Howie was talking about STG. I don't know if anyone out there familiar with Gangster Disciples. I was a shot caller at GD, so if I needed something done, I'd just say, hey, come take care of that.
Oh, sorry.
Hello, I'm Henrika Beer. I'm an assistant professor of criminal justice here at UCCS. And first of all, I want to thank you all very much. I have been very inspired by all of you. It takes a lot of courage to come talk to all of the students and some of us professors here. So thank you so much. Some of those philosophical questions that you received about causes and reasons that maybe somebody becomes an offender in the first place is because I am teaching a criminological theory class, so it's all my fault. So, but I'm so glad that you kind of clarified it. Basically what you were saying kind of goes against everything that I have been teaching during my class. So I'm going to be getting lots of discussion. I bet next Monday about this. But basically, I'm really glad that what you were saying, that everybody has a choice, and I was very inspired to hear this from you guys, and that everybody can have a fork in the road, and depending what your situation is and what those kind of things that are happening in your life at that given moment, and sometimes you can be just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and depending what's going on at that given time, what decision you can make, it can take your life trajectory on, A or B, right? And that lots of us who haven't gotten caught, which by the way, we're going to get to the Moffitt's life course theory next week, and that will show that the majority of us actually indeed are criminal, how by the law defines it, we just haven't gotten caught, right? So we just have avoided the detection, and people who have gotten caught, the prison indeed can change, obviously your life course. And then how you get, especially if you got felony, how you get labeled, and that will change, many things for you even after you get out, right? But I do disagree with one thing. I do think that 4 of you are special. You did have some kind of spark that kind of motivated and made you resilient and gave you some kind of edge to be able to persevere and do something different and come on the other side and survive and be able to make something out of your life. So I'm very thankful for that. But my question for you is that obviously, again, like you said, there are some choices that people make, but I think what we are learning in criminological theory are that maybe there are some groups of individuals who have all these social structural factors stacked against them from birth on. And instead of, intervention would be always a much better way to go versus trying to intervene after somebody has already been put into the criminal justice system from very early on, in some cases when they are just 10 years old, right? So especially for people growing up, maybe minorities, urban areas, getting involved in a gang life from very early on because they may not have parents home, parents are working, or parents are in prison, so forth. So just from your personal experience and maybe encountering these types of individuals in the correctional setting, do you think that as a society we can do something to intervene? Can we put intervention programs in place before the kids even get involved in the criminal justice system?
A really good guy that lived once a long time ago said the poor will always be among us. And, there are certain societal problems that will always exist because there will always be greedy human beings and there will always be the less fortunate. And obviously the less fortunate are at higher risk for landing in jail and prison. Unfortunately, for higher education, and I don't think it's just the students, I think it's also the pressure that's put on the educators in higher education, is higher education is driven strongly by the culture. And our culture right now fields 2 soccer teams, and no matter how many goals the soccer teams score, they both get trophies for participating. And our culture is strongly pushing an ideology of victimization. That whatever bad we do in our lives is somebody else's or something else's fault. You see that, especially in the medical profession, where every single thing that's wrong with us or every bad choice we make is some sort of disease and can be pilled away and can be handled with a chemical. I struggle with those ideas. And especially I struggle with those because a vast majority of the offenders that are in prison right now are on some kind of psychotropic medication. And I really struggle with those ideas that my choices aren't mine. That they're somehow predicated on something outside of me. I guess I don't like that because of the rebel in me. But I'm nobody's victim. I'm no one's, no thing's victim. I either do this or I don't do this, and that's my responsibility. That's on me, and I have to take that responsibility. And if I'm willing to say it's your fault that I did what I did, or it's society's fault, or it's this circumstance's fault that I did what I did, I'm always going to be a victim. I'm never going to get outside of that. And I just, for me personally, I won't even speak for these guys, but I think they'll agree, we're nobody's victim. We make or break our lives based on the choices we make in time and space, regardless of what our history tells us we should be doing. And I think we're prime examples. And it's not just one guy. And it's not just four. There's a whole bunch of guys Roger could have brought here today that are just like us. And I appreciate that you think we're special, but if you're willing to own your own madness, you can change it. If you're going to blame it on everyone else, it'll never change. You'll never be able to step outside of those factors.